very much. Well, I'm definitely not Varsha Kodiyar, as some of you know. So Varsha, unfortunately, is remotely connected, but we could actually make the technology work to get her to present. So I'm going to present on her behalf. So my name is Susanna Sunta-Sansone. I'm from the University of Oxford, but I also actually am a consultant for Nature Publishing Group and the academic honorary editor of Scientific Data, for which Varsha is the editorial curator. So I have a relation actually with what the topic's being presented. Okay. So what Scientific Data is, it's an open access data journal that we launched last year. So it's part of the Spring and Nature family. And it's about, it's about really focusing on the data reuse, data credit, data publication, because actually the main article type, it's a data descriptor, which is a data paper, although we have a new type of article as well that complements the data descriptor. So if you want to know more about Scientific Data and the way we make also the data, the experimental metadata, browsable and searchable and visually presented through what we call the Eyes Explorer, I have a poster tomorrow. You can come and see me too. Okay, so what actually, let me try to... animation, it's gone. Right, okay, so Varsha put together a couple of very nice slides that try to tell, positive story, encouraging people to publish the data, because data papers do give credit to people that actually work in creating those data sets which underpin the traditional article the way we know it. So this is just an example of a Nature Biotech paper which complements the Scientific Data article, or you can say vice versa. So the biotechnology, the Nature Biotechnology article described this new assembly algorithm that's been developed. And the associated data paper in Scientific Data describe all the data sets, how the data, all the sequence data has been created, has been packaged, and can be reused. So he gives the amount of information, the data paper, that you can't find in the Nature Biotechnology article. But what's really more important here, and I hope the animation works, that if you look at the paper, the author from the Nature Biotechnology article and the one in Scientific Data, only few overlap. What really this means that very typically the people who actually create the data, being the postdoc, perhaps which has done some of the work, or the technologist, the data analyst, which done perhaps a minor role, or even the data curator, don't feature in the big article. And so this also means that it really highlights and gives credit to the people that do create the data set and make that data set describable in a way that is reusable. So the other example, I have a problem with the animation, it's this one. Let me try to avoid the animation. Brilliant. It's that a data paper do make the data more reusable. And this is another example of a successful story, a real one. So we have Daniel right there, who actually knew about the data set that Chris had created, this FMRI data set, even before actually Chris even published in Scientific Data, because he shared it on Torrent Exchange, the data set. But because Daniele doesn't really work in the same field that Chris does, he could not understand how to reuse the data set, because the data set, the data file, didn't come with many descriptors, with many metadata attached to it to describe how to reusing it. It was only after Daniele saw the Twitter from Scientific Data advertising the publication of the data set from Chris, describing what actually was done, all the steps, and how somebody else can reuse, that Daniele finally accessed the data and was able to reuse it. So let's just have a quick look how actually we really compared the traditional article with the data paper. And the traditional article, it's really about the discovery, it's about the hypothesis, and now you reach those. And we do know that not all the data get presented in full. And those data set is valuable. Perhaps the usual negative result, as we all know, never get published or mentioned or deposited somewhere. The data paper does complement a traditional article because it allowed the author to describe exactly how the data set was created, the entire data set, a lot of information which never get into the traditional article. Now, a publication of a data journal does not preclude a traditional article, certainly not within the Nature family of the journal, but also in many other journals do, as long as, indeed, there is additional value to the traditional article on top of a data journal. So, let me try to remove the article too. This is just another going to the detail of how we created these data descriptors. So the data descriptor, because it's about data, it's not just narrative, because then it will be too simple anyway. We associate the narrative with a machine-readable metadata descriptor, which Varsha herself curate and enrich with the help of the authors, but reading also the text of the paper. And that machine components, it's in a format called ISA format, which then it's visualized through this ISA Explorer, where you can browse the data set. So you don't just go and browse the homepage of Scientific Data and the article, you browse the metadata, you query by species, you query by technology type, you query by the type of repository the data it's seen, and you retrieve the data set and the associated article you like. As I say, the poster tomorrow, I can show you what that is. So Scientific Data complements existing repository. That's very important. There is no repository old at Nature Publishing Group. There is only this experimental metadata in ISA format that links and point to the data file which are in the public repository. And Scientific Data has created and maintained a list of over 80 repositories, and we help the author to go to deposit the data in the right repository, which is appropriate to their discipline, but also has the right criteria of sustainability, identifier, and so on and so forth, which is important for preserving those data for the people that read the journal and others. And those list of repository, it's also something that, if there is another poster tomorrow, I'm sorry that I keep referring to the poster, but it's called biosharing poster, because we work with this registry of database and standard, because the list of database and standards that we recommend to the author are created through this registry. So it's also important to acknowledge that a growing number of institutional repositories are coming to the fore, and it's important to acknowledge that some data has to go there too, and particularly where there is no specific discipline repository. So we do allow, indeed, users to submit their data set to the institutional repository, and we have a workflow for this. We allowed, first of all, we do accept the data descriptor because we don't want to stop this to happen, and then when the author tell us that this is the institutional repository they want to submit the data in because nothing else exists, then we also we make sure that as a journal, we contact the institutional repository, and we have an internal check. Well, actually, we have a public checklist on the website that, with some criteria that we need the repository to be able to meet for us to say, yes, it's a secure and appropriate place to place your data. And we need to be sure that the DOI gets minted, and then once the repository gets accepted, it's also available to the author through the pull-down menu of the submission, the article submission system. And let me also conclude on the topic of data citation. And there's a couple of animation here. So first of all, because it's a data paper, it's important to cite the data correctly. And as you know, Force 11 has been working with CodeData 1 minute, yes, with CodeData, with the RDA group to create the data citation principle, which of course we obey to and we follow, and that's how we properly cite the data set. But we also, of course, in these cases, we are showing that we are citing linking to the institutional repository, and this slide in particular highlight the fact that there is a need for institutional repository and the data site to make sure that the namespace it's harmonized, because apparently in the data site metadata, the way that, as you can see, the publisher name is slightly different from the way that the DOI is maintained. So we need an harmonization between the name of the institutional repository, and this is really my last slide where I say it's what do we require from repository being institutional global. We have a checklist on the website, and there are criteria which we follow and we look at through, and particularly we need to make sure that when it's a discipline repository, community standards as content standards are implemented, that there are stable identifiers, and there is a preservation plan, and there is no restriction to the data set, of course, unless it's specific sensitive data, and so there is a way to access it. And with this, I just want to acknowledge everybody at NTV Data, which is also a partnership with Dryden and Fixture as a generalistic repository supporting the journal, in addition to the 80 specific domain repository we support. And as I said, if you want to know more about the biosharing and the ISA Explorer, there are posters tomorrow. And thank you to Varsha to provide such nice slides.